Cool, we're done. Tom Moody, thank you very much. This is a treat for me. Hi, how you doing? How's things? How's lockdown?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. It's good to chat to you, even though we're virtually on the other side of the world. But yeah, no, lockdown's treating me like I think most people. It's a very different experience. Every day, it's nearly like Groundhog Day, isn't it? You sort of you wake up and which I've done, try to get into a bit of a set routine, and before you know it, the day's gone, and you're looking for that first glass of wine and enjoying what has been cooked during the day.
Absolutely. There's an element it's like for me, it sort of feels like back playing days because the day of the week doesn't really matter. It's either a play day, a training day, or a day off. It kind of has that feel to it that it's not a Monday. It's just another day off in between. It's a long period of a long break between games, but it just feels like the days of the week don't matter.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, it's a good point. You know, there's no such thing as a weekend, is there?
No.
When you're playing, particularly on the English circuit, you tend to every day just rolls into the next. The only, I suppose, real day that stood out for me in England were the Sundays, because it was Sunday League, and Sunday League cricket was, a big feature, particularly in the Midlands, where I played most of my career at Worcester. We used to get big crowds there, and you certainly knew it was Sunday because it was a 2:00 start, so you could sleep in, and you have your 40 over bash, and everyone's happy.
Were you a curry and a couple of lagers kind of guy?
I enjoyed a curry, but it wasn't my go-to.
That 2:00 start, sort of quite, little Saturday night, couple of a curry and a couple of lagers,
Yeah. Look, I enjoyed a beer, and as we know with the county circuit, that sort of goes hand in hand, doesn't it? Sort of the couple of beers after a day's play with your teammates and the opposition. The tray, the first experience for me of county cricket, which surprised me, was when the room attendant came around in the morning with his little notepad and went around to each team member and said, "Look, what are you looking for today? Is it going to be a lager shandy, a lime and soda, or are you going to throw everything into it and go for a Guinness?" Ooh. And to be honest with you, that to me was very new, and to have to make that decision at 9:00 in the morning, I thought was very unfair.
Yeah, you got to
at least give me a chance to see what my day's going to look like. I might need a Guinness by the end of it, otherwise just a lime and soda.
And there's a fair old chance I might need a warm cup of hot chocolate or something, rather, because it's freezing cold early season. That's a pretty decent looking bookcase you've got behind there. There's a reasonable amount of yellow books there. Are you a collector, or are they kind of? Do you read them? That's probably the most important question. Do you read them?
No.
Yeah.
I have flicked through them from time to time. But what I decided to do towards the end of my career, I decided to get the wisdom for every year I played first class cricket. So
wow,
there's a few there. Goes from 86 through to 2000. So yeah, there's a few, and a few extras on top, which were additions that I had made up, which was related to my tribute year at Worcester.
Yeah, nice. I normally do very little research because I want to learn and I want to be surprised and things like that but I did 300 first class games. That's a ridiculous amount of cricket. That's a lot of games of first class cricket. And now I see how many seasons you're involved. I can see why.
Yeah, look, it is amazing. They add up, don't they? Particularly in county cricket, they tend to add up. Yeah, look, I think the 300, my back's not surprised. 300, my knees aren't surprised, neither my ankles. But look, I look back on it, and to me, I look back on it with, fond memories, and it being more of a privilege than anything else that, I've managed to play for so long and in so many different teams.
How again, just a quick glance at your profile: 8 Test matches. Now that completely surprised me. That blew me away for your post-career, if you like, and how busy you have been. Don't take this the wrong way. There's a, and I was also surprised with the 200s, the 350s. It was a pretty decent 8-test track record.
Yeah, look, I had an interesting international career in that, you know, I was very fortunate, but then I suppose on the other hand, I was probably unlucky, like a lot of Australians in my era, where Australian cricket sort of got to a point where it really settled and became galvanised. The team became galvanised, and therefore there was very little movement within the playing 11. So myself, along with many, were sort of the cabs waiting to, you know, to be picked up. Mm-hmm. And I played 5 of those test matches in Australia where I got those couple of hundreds. Mm-hmm. And they weren't one after the other, those test matches. They were sort of come in because someone's got injured, you know, so there's no real continuity. But I look back on it and understand what the situation was. And, you know, someone had to be unlucky, and I wasn't the only one. It wasn't if, you know, I was sort of the only one left on the bookshelf, so to speak. There was a number of players in that generation that had a very good case that they could have said, look, I could have played a few more.
Who were you replacing? Who were the guys that you were popping in for injuries or maybe horses for courses?
Yeah, it wasn't too many horses for courses. It wasn't too many courses around. But yeah, look, my first opportunity came through Jeff Marsh getting a broken toe as first test match, and that was against New Zealand actually. At the Wacker, and Jeff got a broken big toe. Carl Rackerman just pinned him in the nets with a very full pitch delivery, and that was the end of him for a few weeks. And that was when I got a phone call out of the blue 48 hours before the test match. Right, you're in. Oh,
and you're wicket keeping.
Yeah. Not Rod Marsh, Jeff Marsh.
Sorry. My apologies. I've got all my marshes. And how'd that go? But 48 hours, you haven't got a long time to think about it. You basically get on an airplane and you arrive and you unpack and you do half a day training, or, you know, do one session and you're playing a test match. How did that prep go?
Yeah. Well, thankfully I didn't have to get on an airplane. That's probably why I got the phone call, because it was a cheap phone call. It wasn't long distance, and 2, they didn't have to pay for an air ticket. So, and 3, I could stay at home. So there's no hotel expenses. Mm-hmm. But yeah, look, to answer your question, look, I thought it was probably, if anything, an advantage, because you didn't have the build up and the hoo-ha around the whole week building up into your first test match. It all happened very quickly. And before you knew it, you're out there facing your first ball. So I thought it, if anything, worked to my advantage.
Yeah. Do you take an element of that into team selections now as a coach? Do you use that piece of, you now see that as an advantage? Do you maybe use that with some of the players that you may be given a surprise debut or called into on, you know, called in last minute into squads?
To be honest with you, no, because I've sort of felt over the length of my period that communication is really important, and most people like to have consistent and clear communication. So I do my very best to inform players what the playing 11 is the night before, and I'm talking about on the sort of the T20 roller coaster, where, you know, you just roll from one match to the next, and you're playing every other day, you know, not every time, but more often than not. So I just feel it's really important that players have the chance to have as much warning as possible without sort of it getting out to others that, oh, well, they're playing 3 spinners or they're playing an extra middle order bat or whatever the combination is, trying to keep that very much within the team. But just so the players have a chance to do their homework. Some like to have that prep time to sit down with the analyst, sit down with a coach, whether it's the head coach or a bowling coach or whatever it might be, to do their prep so that they feel well set for the day, the night before. To suddenly say to a guy 20 minutes before the toss, oh, listen, by the way, you're in. And that sometimes happens because you're forced, your hand can be forced where someone can tweak a hammy in warm-ups or whatever the case might be. But I think that's unfair because, you know, there's so much more that goes to the way that players prepare these days to what it used to be many moons ago when I was preparing.
Is there an element that, say in this play, travel, day off, travel, play. Is there an element that if you didn't tell them early enough, players get into that routine of just not playing? They kind of get used to the fact that they're not playing and then prepare to not play because the team might be winning. And so you do have to tell them early enough. Have players got a little bit... Now, I don't know this at all, so I'm asking, have players got a little bit used to just being on the road and not playing?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think possibly some players can, but I think that depends on the environment you're in. And again, the environment that I think is important to have is an environment where not only your playing members, but your non-playing members are constantly communicated to. You know, you're going to have a player that hasn't played for 3 weeks and is probably thinking, you know, I've got no chance of playing because player A and player B are playing so well, and they'll probably end up going, if they do make a change, with, you know, player C. So I'm well out of the equation. But I think that's where your attention to detail is really important from a coaching perspective, is that those players that aren't absolutely, you know, in the mix at that very moment, that, you know, they need to know that could change very quickly, and you need to tell them the story how it could change. And therefore you set their training up in preparing for that potential change, and without obviously giving the guarantee, because it may not happen, but you've got to keep people engaged. You've got to keep people moving forward in the right direction, because it's not individuals that win championships. It's the collective number. It's the squad that really drive those successes.
Why is that? It's just disappeared from my brain. But were you part of a touring squad? Were you part of a touring squad for test matches where you may play or you may not play? Were you ever in that sort of scenario on an away tour?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was 12th man for the whole Ashes of 1989.
Yeah.
And it was a knife-edge decision between Mark Taylor and myself. And you probably think, well, you're kidding yourself, thinking it's between Mark Taylor and myself. But both of us hadn't played Test cricket. So both of us were unknown to international cricket to that point. I had actually played one-day cricket for Australia, but not Test cricket. So in the lead up to the first Test match, which is at Headingley, it was a toss of a coin between Mark Taylor and myself. What was potentially going to happen was, if I played, Marsh and Boone would open the batting, and if Taylor played, Taylor and Marsh will open the batting and Boone will bat 3.
Wow, yeah.
So they ended up going with that combination, and they didn't look back, because it was a series that Australia dominated on you know, very good surfaces, where both Taylor, Boone, Marsh, War, you name it, all you know, enjoy good times in the English summer.
So is there elements of what you do now as a coach that are quite different to how communication was run back when you were a player?
I think that there's a lot that you can't help but sort of implement that you felt was missing during your time. And I think you also got to respect the times are very different. There's no excuse not to be able to communicate this day and age, because there's so many vehicles that you can communicate with. Ideally, the number one vehicle is in person. And interesting enough, a lot of people, and I'm not just talking about the person that's delivering the message, it's also the people that are receiving the message, try to avoid that situation. because they don't want the conflict.
Yeah. I'm not answering that hotel door. No, I know who it is, and I'm not answering the door.
They're looking through the peephole, giving it the, oh no, it's the coach. Am I playing or am I not playing? But yeah, so it's a very interesting one where I try to force myself when it's physically possible to do it in person, because I think that is the best way where messages can't be misread. You know, a WhatsApp message can be misunderstood. And also a phone call at times can be misunderstood. But when you're in person, you can read body language. You can see if they're misreading what you're trying to explain or whatever the case might be. And it gives you a chance to you know, I suppose, deliver it in the right way.
When you were given the negative message, when you were given the sorry Tom, not this one, how did you react? I know when I was playing, and if I got that message and I actually thought I should have been playing, like I'd had a couple of okay games, not a couple of bad games, I got quite agitated, and I basically had to say, okay, thanks. Can we talk about this in a little bit, because I'm a little bit twitchy and I don't want to say the wrong thing. How did you react to those messages?
I think reasonably well, to be honest with you. Probably because I was used to it.
Yeah.
Because I was never a permanent fixture, you know, in the side or in the playing 11. So whenever it came, to me, it was like, well, this is a bonus. I've got now, how long can I try to sustain this position in the side? Yeah. So at times you obviously not say, I've been left out on a number of times over the years, but I think I tried to understand what the reason is, and not sort of, I don't think it's in my nature to sort of blow up you know, with that decision. I might ask more questions, and you
so
know,
you
that
could,
I think takes.
You could ask more questions right away. You didn't have to have any sort of like a right.
I sort of I particularly the older I got, I sort of was, I suppose, had a little bit more courage, if I could put it that way, to sort of say, well, you know, how do you? Well, I've got a good example of that, and that was, you know, when I was playing in my last 3 Test matches. Out of the 8 that I played, they're away from home in Sri Lanka. And I remember on the flight over to Colombo, Bob Simpson was coach at the time, pulling me aside and explaining that he wanted me to open the batting. And I thought it was quite unusual, given that 90% of my career, or 99% of my career, was a middle order sort of batting from 3 to 5. And the first 5 Test matches I played, I also batted in those positions. And I said to him, well, no problems at all. I'll bat where the team needs me to bat, but do you see me as the long-term opener? So I sort of had the courage to ask the question, do you see me as a long-term opener? And I said, in particularly, because this was around August time, in particular, that this summer in Australia, we've got the West Indies coming. So do you see me opening the batting against the West Indies? Again, I think a young Tom Moody probably wouldn't have done that. But I think there's nothing wrong with asking sensible questions like that.
Look, I got put in a position sort of similar where there wasn't a role for me that I wanted in the bowling lineup. I wanted to be the third seamer because that was what I was most what I could do. I didn't want to open the bowling in white ball cricket. I ended up having to, and that probably cost me my place in the team because I couldn't do it and I wasn't good enough at doing it. By filling someone else's role, I ended up losing my spot in the team. You opening the batting in Sri Lanka, that could have again cost you your place in your team.
Yeah, I had very similar circumstances to what you're saying. Like, I was happy to do it, but I knew in heart of hearts that really I wasn't the long-term solution for Australian cricket as the opening bat. And as it turned out, which I didn't know at the time, which was a surprise to us all actually, was that was the hardest place to bat in Sri Lanka because they were using those grace balls that had these whopping great seams on them, and their medium pacers would just get in the first 20 overs, they'd get the ball to dance around off the seams. And, we'd be quite often, 3 for 30, 3 for 50, 4 for 50. And it was the middle order that resurrected our hopes over there. It was the same tour that Mark Waugh got the Olympic rings. He's got 4 ducks in a row. So, I don't want to drag poor Junior into this, but bad luck you're in it. But, so often we'll be sitting in the dressing room together with our head between our knees thinking, God, what's happening to us? We both had, challenging, a very challenging tour.
That's do you have those? Do you take those considerations in now? You go to a player and you think, geez, we want to get you on the team, and the only place we can kind of get you on the team is opening the batting. Do you take that in consideration when you're choosing the team on success and failure, on form and promise? That you got a number 7 who you hot damn, you want him playing, but the only place you can get him is in at the top of the order. Do you then drop him as if he's not succeeding as an opener?
Yeah, I think to answer your question is yes. Yeah. But I think what I have done in the past is explain exactly that situation. So let's look at that scenario you're talking about. You've got a gun player, but you just can't fit him in his ideal position. I think you just have to explain that. Look, this is the current situation. That these 2 players are preferred at 5 and 6, and I know that you could easily challenge those positions. But at the moment, the only way I can get you in the 11, and I want you in the 11, is at the top of the order. And how do you think about that? And you judge your decision also on his response.
No one says
his
no.
His response may be sorry.
No one says no. No one goes no. I don't want to.
No.
Yeah. No one says that.
No, but they don't. But some of them can sort of be hesitant with it because there's still resentment that they're not in that position at 5 and 6.
Yeah.
So then if you feel that there's that unease, a little bit of unease, but look, you then talk them through, look, let's give it a go. You're not going to be judged on your position in the side, just because you've been thrown in the deep end at the top. The team needs you to play that role. We need you to play your game, no one else's game. If it doesn't work, we'll revisit it, have a discussion, and we might find that, your preferred position opens up in 3 or 4 games' time.
You've done all right as a coach. What's been the okay? Let me start that again. You've done all right as a coach, which means that you spend a lot of time talking to players, which means that these are typical traits, I'm guessing, of successful coaches. They have a good connection and good communication lines. That's tiring, though. Do you find, certainly in the IPL, that it is almost as tiring for you as it is for some of the players?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
An IPL stint, it takes time, as in not days, but a couple of weeks to come down off. Yeah. It is tiring, not physically, but it is. There's a lot of mental strain. There's stress, obviously, of expectation of performance. That one of the toughest jobs coaching in that environment is managing upwards, not managing downwards. Where your players are. You in that environment, you're gifted with world-class players, and it's overwhelming having that talent in your dressing room and that you're responsible for. But it's the challenge of managing upwards and getting people that are whether they're owners or senior management around the owners to understand that cricket, there is a winner and there is a loser, and there's not too often that you're going to win every single game, every single day that you go out and compete. So it's trying to keep that stress and that sort of reflexed, decisions that they want to make on the back of a bad game. Yeah. Even though you've won the previous 3 in a row.
Yeah, I had Dan Vittori, spoke to him a wee while ago, and similar sort of similar answer in that owners demand victories, and in almost no other kind of cricket part of the circuit where an owner, a chairman, a director of finance, whatever, would or can come in and demand a change or demand success. That is something that is quite individual about the IPL, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. One thing that I tried to do with key people, and that is whether it be owners or people that were the direct answerable to owners, was try to understand what the playing field is and communicate to them how I felt what success looked like. And, you know, it's very easy to say, oh, a successful coach or a successful team is a winning team, the team that wins the trophy. Well, you know, we all know that's not that realistic, unless you're Chicago Bulls or something like that during their crazy days. But even for them, that was challenging. So understanding what they see as success, and then you tried to help them by educating them what you felt that, you know, success should be measured by. And my philosophy was always, well, let's forget about winning the title. Let's talk about being in the finals. So let's gear our campaign to be in the top four. And once we find ourselves in a position where we're, you know, talking about playing finals, well, let's see if we can find one of those spots in the top two, because then we have that second chance during the final series. So just making it a little bit more realistic for them. So on the journey, if you are losing consecutive games, it's not an absolute train smash.
Yeah. But the toll on you. Okay, you got players. Some need a bit of angry Moody. Some need a bit of love Moody. The other coaching staff sometimes need a kick in the pants. Sometimes they need an arm around them as well, because they have emotional demands as well. And then you've got owners and the people around that. And then we go back to you saying you need a couple of weeks at the end of the tournament to sort of get back. But how do you juggle that emotional toll while you're away, while you're involved in the tournament?
It motivates me more than anything, because I enjoy that side of it. I think it sort of comes back to my playing days, where I found myself in leadership roles, throughout most of my career. And I think I'm naturally attracted to, you know, that position of having to support, help, lead, listen to people around me. So I think if I didn't have that, I'd be a little bit lost, I think.
Yeah. Who was that guy for you when you were playing then? Go back to your playing days, whether it be state, county. Who was that guy for you that gave you that help and support that took the toll on that person, but or was challenged by that person, but you found solace with them?
That's a really interesting question, because I think a team environment's changed so dramatically, where I think there are more hands out this day and age for people to help you off the floor than what there was in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Quite often you had to, if you found yourself on the floor with a setback, whether it be injury, whether it be form, back certainly in the generation that I played, the 80s and 90s, you had to find yourself back onto your own feet more often than not. Yes, of course, you had your family and the people that loved you, but certainly when it comes to a sporting environment today, there are more hands and employed hands to play that role.
So where was your go-to? Where did you get that because we all need it. We all need we need love, we need shelter, we need food, in terms of to survive.
Yeah.
And that's still the same in any job. You still need care. You still need an affinity, a connection, some sort of a relationship. So where do you get that? Or were men just men back then?
Yeah. Look, I think you got it. You drew it from your team.
Yeah.
But it was harder to draw from the team in that generation that I'm referring to than it is this day and age, because I think people are a lot more aware socially of supporting each other, and the awareness of us doing this as a collective bunch. But certainly back in the 80s and 90s, that was there. You would have a chat after a day's play over a few beers, and once the atmosphere had softened a bit, you gathered a bit of strength from others through conversation around, geez, I can't, I'm doing my head in here, I can't believe that I've nicked off again, and then you would have I suppose that support around you. But interesting enough, where I played all my first class cricket in Australia, which was Western Australia, we were one of the first states in Australia, and I think one of the first class teams in the world to bring in a sports psychologist. Sandy Gordon, who was involved with the team for many, many years, was the first to really play that role that you're referring to. Not only from an individual's point of view, but from a team point of view. And I look back on that aspect and his involvement through my career as a missed opportunity.
Look, I love that, and that's like, look, Western Australia, you're so far remote that there is an element that it is. You would maybe identify that role earlier because you're always traveling, you're always on the road, and you're traveling a long way to get to the other states to play. Is there an element that did you play here while there was still pastoral care, while there was still a pastor or a priest would come in and spend time with the team? Did you play in any of that era here?
In county cricket?
Sorry, in the UK.
Yeah. Well, we had, when I first started at Worcester, the CEO at the time was Reverend Mike Vockings. And he I think played that role. It's interesting you say that. I think he played that role where people that felt that they needed to share something that was a little bit beyond the dressing room banter. He was that person that people felt that they could lean on, and naturally, someone that's holding a position like he was holding, not as CEO, but someone that was representing the church. I think people felt comfortable sharing a problem if they had a problem, whether it be a personal problem or whether it may have been a problem that was a result of performance. Yeah.
The whole changing room scenario, and as you said, there's more players with hands out than the other way around. Going back to your era, and changing rooms were, I think, a little bit more social in terms of, end of the day, you'd have a beer, and it would happen more often. It would happen more regularly than it would happen now. That enforced sitting together, I guess if you look back now, did that kind of become that therapy session, if you like, that sort of informal, what players don't necessarily get now?
Absolutely. I remember certainly in my early years at Western Australia, we had an unwritten rule that you weren't allowed to leave the dressing room until the esky was empty. And on days that you batted, on Shield days that you batted, you would take 2 or 3 cans of beer to the opposition dressing room. You'd sit there, and quite often, it's interesting you make that point, because quite often, if you were in a position where you were struggling with an element of your game, you would naturally gravitate towards someone in the opposition that was in a similar position. And you would sit there and, how you getting on? And, you know, and then before you know it, because you're in a very similar position, the conversation you come straight to the point because you're both bursting at the seams to talk about it. You know, whether it be, you know, the
Hey,
fact
mate,
that
what do you reckon?
yeah, you're not taking a wicket or you're not scoring a run or what might be the case. But and I remember Graham Wood, who was captain of the West Australian team early on. You know, as a young bloke, you say, well, who do I go and sit next to? He would say, I don't care who you sit with, but just make sure you walk out of that dressing room having learnt more than what you walked in. So, in other words, he was saying, take advantage of it, because in that side, you may have a player that's played 50 test matches, or a player that's played 100 first-class games, or someone that can swing the ball around corners or play spin really well, or whatever the case may be. And if you're not taking advantage of the fact of putting a couple of cans of beer between you and that person and saying, how are you going? Look, I'm really interested in the way that you bowl that outswinger. You know, talk me through your grip, or talk me through your run-up, or talk me through your position at the crease, or whatever it might be. It was a case, well, this is your best learning environment. It's a hotbed of you know, talent and learnings to be taken.
You're really good about talking about things as a group. Who were the people you went and talked to? Who were the guys that you forced yourself to go and sit next to? Let's get to Tom. Let's get to Tom. Who were the people that you sought out and early in your career, as opposed to when you'd made friends on the circuit? Who were the people that you sought early on to go to have a bit of a, or left to go and talk to because no one else was talking to them because a player in the similar sort of situation?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think when I was younger, I would normally gravitate to people in my age group. Mm-hmm. So if we're playing New South Wales, I'd naturally go to one of the War brothers because we played under 19 cricket against each other. And if I played against Victoria, it'd be, again, people in that age bracket of mine, which was your Tony Dodemaide, your Paul Rifles. Mm-hmm. Dean Jones was older than me and more established, so it was quite scary to go and sit next to him, it'd be a bit scary to go and sit next to Alan Border, as much as everyone, that was the number one ticket. I want to sit next to AB. One, he loves a beer. Two, this guy's a legend. Mm. And if I could just pick his brains or just be in his company, you know, that's going to be good enough for me. So I think early on it was very much the easy targets. And then once you got a little bit established and confident in that cricketing environment, you by all means go and sit next to Alan Border or David Hooks at South Australia, or Jeff Lawson for New South Wales, and they would command the stage. You know, they were the ones that were, you know, preaching to the disciples.
I missed a massive opportunity. 2 test match series in South Africa. Finished the second test. We got smashed in both. I didn't go and sit next to Callis, and he was in that team. Dale Steyn and Callis. Steyn was, but I just wanted to sort of share some time or space with Callis and just hear him talk about how the game. You know, hear him talk about stuff, and I never did. And it sort of is one of those things that it wouldn't have changed me as a player, but it just would have been that little bit of stardust that you talk about, the AB kind of factor. You just want a little bit to rub off. That has become harder to do though. And I think it's actually almost gone back the other way. I think it's becoming easier to do now. There was a period when I was playing where I think it got a little bit, it didn't happen as often as it should do. Do you use that now when you're coaching? Do you try and get your teams into the opposition changing room or vice versa?
It's very difficult to do because as much as I'd love to do that, when you're on the road in that franchise environment, and look, it's different. Like I haven't been in the international coaching environment or the domestic coaching environment for a few years now. So I've been in the franchise environment. It's a bit like the circus. Everyone's more interested after the game in packing up the circus to get to the next destination than they are worrying about enjoying the destination they're currently in. So it is very difficult. But in saying that, what I do encourage is for us to have a chance to review and reflect after the game informally. And again, that can be done with a glass of water or a beer or a glass of wine. I have no issues with what you do with it, or it can be enjoyed with, the franchise might put on some food. You prepare it in advance. You put on a bit of food, so you create this environment where everyone comes to that point and you eat and chat. So I do try to encourage that, because I think, that's where those informal conversations between your senior player and some of the younger players happen in a spontaneous way. It's not forced.
It's a really good public forum to tell someone that they're dropped as well, isn't it?
Yeah, look, not ideal, but yeah. You're talking about softening the blow. You can go and grab something to eat now.
Yeah, go at a restaurant to say goodbye to a girlfriend or something. Yeah, they can't make a scene. Yeah, your playing days, they are a wee while ago now, sure, but you struggled with injuries as much as the next person. Being taller, you levers, etc. You said back and you said knees. How much time did you spend off the park when you injured and then couldn't get back in a team because whoever replaced you was doing pretty good?
Look, I consider myself really lucky, considering the length of my career and the number of games I played. Yes, I had injuries, but I didn't miss a huge number of games because of those injuries. Yeah, I missed a few here and there with a back injury and an elbow injury and a few bits and pieces, but nothing major. But again, the culture around injuries was very different back then than it is today. I think today, at times, you nearly feel like people are looking for injuries or hot spots on scans or whatever, against treating the symptoms. How you're feeling, that's very much how it was yesteryear. You treat the symptoms, but now they treat nearly what the scans are telling them. And I think if you scanned every sports person, you'll find you'll find a few hot spots if you go looking hard enough.
The risk and reward for playing injured and then it turning into something bigger has got a lot greater now, hasn't it? And so is there an element that you think players are kind of trying to protect their future investment by not playing with a niggle as opposed to playing with a niggle, which we all would have done?
Yeah, look, to be honest with you, I'd hope not.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And if I sort of felt that you had a player like that in your environment, I don't think he'd last very long. Mm-hmm. Because a dishonest player or a dishonest environment, I think, can be seen pretty quickly by many other players that are putting themselves on the line. So I think in the right environment, those players are found out very quickly.
Good. I'm glad, because I have there was a few people around when I was playing. It was any slight niggle. And this was even before there was the round the year franchise cricket. They would sit out a lot earlier than expected. They did go on to have quite extensive careers, but you're sort of still frustrated at having to pick up what they weren't doing. So now back and knees still give you a bit of grief, but that's life.
Yeah, but it's manageable. It's not like.
You didn't bowl fast enough to Moods.
Yeah, well, I wish I could. I was so frustrated. It's ridiculous. Like a batsman that bowled, that's how I sort of categorise myself.
Yep.
But how can you be 6'6"?
Yeah.
105 kilos, that was when I was playing, 105 kilos, and not be able to bowl fast? Like that hurts.
Yeah.
that really hurts me. Not my back. It hurts hurts my soul that I can't run in and bowl 140 clicks and stick it to those guys that are trying to stick it to me every time I walk out the bat.
Well, you just couldn't. You just didn't have the ability to, or you didn't.
Yeah,
or you never learnt it. Does that, if that makes sense?
Look, I think.
Or were you just smart?
I think no. Well,
longevity.
I think bowlers. You know very early whether you're going to be able to bowl with pace or not.
Yeah.
It was interesting. I was having a conversation with Dale Steyn a couple of weeks ago about fast bowling, and he knew that he had the ability to bowl fast because everything he did as a kid, he said, was that he did it so quickly. He wanted to do everything quickly. So he would set, various obstacles around his house that he'd run around and try to do it as fast as he possibly could. So he had that sort of instinct, but also genetic makeup where he could just do things at a fast twitch nature, where I think you've either got that and you naturally can then run in and bowl fast, or you plod away and bowl little medium paces.
Yeah, you look at Suleiman Ben, same sort of thing, isn't he? He's about 6'6" and doesn't bowl anywhere near as quick as you. Where do you see yourself? Are you media now, or are you coach now, or do you happily flit?
I consider myself a coach first and foremost. I enjoy the media, always have, because I feel that it's a good learning environment as well, because you're around more often than not former players that have a real understanding of the game and read of the game, and I find that enables me to remain current from that perspective. It also, for example, I've done the last 2 under-19 World Cups for the ICC, and I've done them intentionally, and thankfully been asked to do them because to me it's a great opportunity for me to see what's coming through. So when those players eventually do come through, you've got an understanding. I remember that innings, or I remember that bowling performance, or whatever it might be. So I enjoy all aspects of the game. I've been privileged that I've been managed to have a quite a diverse portfolio, and long may that remain that way.
Yeah, well done. What was your plan leaving the game? Certainly now that's a lot bigger focus when we're in a career, or when players are in careers. Did you have a plan, or were you one of those guys that just knew cricket? No.
I remember being asked when I retired, by the media, well, you're going to get into commentary, you're going to get into coaching, and I said, but no, not at all. I don't see myself doing any of those roles, because during my time of playing, I also held down a part-time job for a construction company, a big building company here in Western Australia, and I just felt that the natural transition was for me to go full-time into that position. Which I did for just over a year. And it wasn't until I got a phone call out of the blue first it was from Middlesex, and then about 5 days later I got the same phone call, same conversation, but it was from Worcester. And they were asking me to come to be their director of cricket. Wow. And it wasn't until then I realised that cricket was calling me, and that adrenaline rush I had, just came back into my bones. I thought, I've just got to do this, like I haven't felt like this for the last year. I've enjoyed the challenge of the work I was doing outside of cricket, but this is nothing like this.
I spoke to Shane Bond the other week, and he took time out of his career to do a year at police college and became a policeman. And then he said that cricket didn't really matter anymore, because he didn't need it. He could just go and be a policeman. So having a job that he could just go and do meant that cricket didn't failures didn't hurt anywhere near as much because they weren't the end of his career, because he'd just go and have a policeman career. Element that may have helped you have the success you did in terms of cricket. It's just a game, and I have work outside of this. I don't just need. I guess it's hard to say because you don't know the other side of the coin. But knowing you've got work, if cricket fails, if you get injured or just goes badly wrong, there's freedom in that.
Yeah, there is freedom in that. Whether that worked for me or not, it's a difficult one to answer. But we were always, I suppose, in my generation, and I'm older than Bondi. We had to work because financially, you needed to not only look after today, but you needed to look after tomorrow. And that was, well, if I don't get picked next game, I'm not getting paid. The way we didn't have contracts, it was match by match. And if you got injured, you didn't get injury payments, you didn't get paid. So, that $200 that you're expecting to get paid for playing that one day game was not there if you weren't selected.
Yeah, that's why you bowled slow moves.
Just put a little medium in front of the slow. Just medium slow.
Medium slow.
Slow,
Sorry.
medium.
Slow. Yeah. No, I don't mean it. But I don't mean it gave Blondie the freedom. He still worked hard, worked his backside off, but it was still just that it kind of became just a game again, as opposed to the money that on the table and the retirement and the kids' futures, etc., etc. It was I think there's a lot to that, and do you get time to deal with? That wasn't a thing when you were playing, though, was it? There was no. I mean, everyone had to kind of work outside of cricket, but was there the focus on a career after cricket back then?
There was, and that was one of the reasons most not everyone worked, but most of the guys tried to find work, recognizing they needed to build a resume. Yeah. Outside of cricket. And it's interesting, just going back to that point around, me at retirement going into that business, which was outside of cricket, construction business. It was interesting when that phone call came from both Middlesex and Worcester, and the feeling I got, it was nearly like, well, I've spent my life at the University of Cricket. Yeah. This is where I belong because this is where I'm most educated, and this is what is second nature to me. Where the construction business, and I'm not talking the business I was working for was a multinational company. They did big sky-rise things as well as big residential deals as well. So it wasn't like just doing duplexes and things like that. It was a considerable, big construction business.
Sounds fun.
But it was nearly like the realization, well, this is where you belong. This is what you understand. This is what you know inside out. This is what you've talked about 24/7 for the past 15 years. So why have you suddenly stopped doing it?
Well, you've made a pretty decent living out of it, I dare say, on the back of that, which is, brilliant. Like coming out of cricket in an era where it wasn't particularly well paid. What was your crossover with the Kerry Packet scenarios? Were you in? Now my history dates are not too good here. What was your crossover there? Because it was still World Series cricket when you were around, and you would have played in quite a bit of that.
No, I didn't play World Series cricket. Gosh, I'm not that old. World Series cricket was well and truly done. That finished in the early 80s. I started 86, 87 season.
Okay, sorry.
My I suppose first look into into first class cricket in Australia was more to do with the Australian Rebel Tour to South Africa. Where the likes of Kim Hughes, Terry Alderman, and so on went to South Africa, and it diluted Australian cricket at that point. And I, as a young so-called emerging player, was given a chance, probably a season ahead of what I would have done otherwise, which was a bonus for me because you get in and get a chance to play and find your feet in first class cricket.
How did you look? I always ask this. I always get to the point where we focus on failure, because that's what we do as a lot of the time as players. We focus on our next failure. We don't often think of our next success. How did you cope? What was? I mean, you played in a pretty successful Australian era. Sure, you one day you played a lot more one-day cricket than Test, but when it wasn't so good, how were you? What were you like as a person?
Yeah, look, I think I have over the years, whether it's through my playing career or coaching career, I've been reasonably consistent with my mood swings around performance. There's no doubt that failure hurts, but I managed to sort of use that as motivation in a positive way against a negative way. And I think, so often that's the challenge for any person, whether it's a sports person or anyone in life in general, is being able to use whatever setback that may have sort of come in your path, to be able to use that as a positive energy against a negative energy. And it's first nature is to go and sort of think, well, this is another thing that's just weighing me down and setting me back. The world's against me. That was set up, for me to fail. Against sort of having the glass half full approach. Well, okay, I've learned from that. I might go and seek some advice around how I can do that better, or talk to someone around, why they felt, that setback, occurred and I couldn't cope with it, get their advice. So what you're doing is try to better yourself to overcome that obstacle if it comes in your path again. And I suppose this is, a part of a coaching philosophy as well, is that you're trying to help people build mechanisms to be able to cope with the ups and downs that a day can throw you or a season can throw you, by being more resilient. And resilience is a very powerful thing, but everyone's got it in different doses.
Yeah, and it does run out. The tanks can run dry, and then
absolutely.
Then it gets tough.
Yeah, but and it can come from different ways too, and it can't just, at times it's not just through performance. It's not through a dry run of wickets or runs. It can be something that's happening personal in your life that can be really having a significant effect on, how you're feeling, how you're preparing, how you're resting, which then has an effect on what you're being judged on, and that's your performance.
I get from listening to you talk and from listening to how you've spoken about your interactions with teammates and opposition. You had a confidence which was handy. You had an ability to be comfortable and confident in those changing rooms and in those sort of social circles, so that you did have those people to go to. You did have those inlets.
Yeah, I think, I'm not an introvert person, but I wouldn't say I'm an overly extroverted person either. I think that I had the confidence always to be sociable, and through that confidence, I suppose what you are doing without you knowing that you're doing it, you're offloading some of your baggage onto someone else, through, whether it be through a laugh or whether it be, through a serious chat, over a beer or whatever the case might be. But at the time, I don't sort of recall having a set strategy around that. I think I was just very fortunate. I had, I suppose, that makeup personality makeup that I could, I could express myself that way.
Mate, I'm jealous, hugely jealous of that ability, and I think there's a lot of people are with success and failure to sort of looked at very differently. It is wins and losses as opposed to smiles on faces and those sort of scenarios. So I'm hugely jealous of that ability.
But in saying that, it's not all. For me, it wasn't all roses either, because I made the point about I felt I missed a trick with not taking advantage of Sandy Gordon, who was the sports psych for the West Australian team, and I kick myself. It's a bit like your point about not sitting down with Callis. You probably look at that and think, I just wonder how that conversation would have gone. It may not have made a difference to your career, but you don't know that, because it's a stone that you didn't turn over. And it's a bit like that was only a very small stone, but I missed a pile of stones with regards to the sports psych, where I didn't have, I suppose, the confidence, the courage to be able to say, let me sort of bear all. Let me share what I'm actually thinking. I'm going to peel. I'm going to allow you to peel away the layers. Don't do it too quickly, but just peel away the layers, because I'd really like to know if you can make me more resilient than I am, because I feel vulnerable in this situation. I'm unsure in this situation. I might be able to cover it up, or you might be able to see right through me, but I'd like to be better.
It's nice to see that now. It's nice to be able to see that, if that makes sense. It's nice to be able to acknowledge that, gee whiz, I could have done that better, which means that you now will give other players that access and promote them and sort of push them in that direction for them to become better, I guess.
Yeah, and again, definitely promote, definitely not push.
Sure, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, but just allow them to understand there's an opportunity there if you'd like to take it.
Yeah.
And I'd embrace it if I was you, but it's totally up to you.
Yeah.
And, do it in your own time.
Nice. Moods, thank you so much. It's really interesting that the different scales and where people fit on the success and failure, and how they dealt with their failure to get back to success. And yours is another different sort of story. And it's a lot more positive feelings from your career than I guess a lot of players that I've spoken to have. And that's awesome, because what you've said will resonate with, will sort of make, not every day's a bad day, kind of scenarios for people. Mate, thank you so much for your time.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure.
It's tea time now, isn't it? It's time for a feed and a glass of wine.
Yeah, it's about that time. Yep. So I look forward to that. Pleasure talking to
Tom,
you, and
thank you so much.
Good luck with what you're doing.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Cheers. Hi, Ian O'Brien here. Thanks for getting to the end of this 108 with IOB. I'd appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe, please. But also leave us a message down below in the comments about what was your most interesting or favourite part of this chat. Thanks a lot. Love ya.